Okay, so our outline for today, and I will put this in the chat as soon as I go through some of the things that we're going to talk about today, just so that we have an idea of what we might go through. Again, we're talking about Google Sites. So, first thing is, where is my teacher webpage? Because if you edited it a few years ago when we first made them and you haven't looked at it since, you might not know where that teacher webpage exists, and we'll help you find that today. And then we're going to look at setting up pages within your web page, because even if maybe you have content on there, that content maybe doesn't need to change because you're still going to be using that same web page next year. But you might want to add like a remote learning page or a read aloud page, or however you want to organize those pages, or maybe they're nested under a remote learning heading. So we'll talk about adding pages for easier navigation. Then we're going to look at adding page content, because that's really where this presentation is, right? How do I add content for my students? How do I create it so that it's organized and it's looks nice for them and everything? And then finally, and probably one of the most important things, is not only sharing items from Google Drive correctly with parents, but also sharing your website correctly with parents. So we'll go through all of those items today, and just so that you guys have this information, I'll go ahead and put this in the chat. Okay, so finding your teacher webpage. All of your web pages, as a reminder, are housed in your Google Drive. So if you do not know where your webpage is yet, I would recommend starting in your Google Drive and search for teacher webpage. Now, when you do that, you're going to be looking for the Google Sites icon, and there is a specific icon for Google Sites. So if I search teacher webpage in my Google Drive, now I have a couple teacher web pages just because I like to play around with them, but you'll see the first two options here are Mrs. Margison's teacher webpage. I make that a little bit bigger and you guys can see that icon. So the icon is sort of a bluish purple, and it's going to be in the bottom left-hand corner there, and that's your Google site. So just as maybe a best practice or a recommendation that I have for you, I would either right click on this site right now and add a star to it so that it's in this starred area, or I would bookmark that page. So once you open up that site to edit it, if you click the lock, click and drag the lock down to your bookmark bar, now I have Mrs. Margison's teacher webpage as a bookmark, so that it's very easy for me to edit it. Particularly if this is going to be my hub where I'm going to add information for remote learning for my students. I'm probably going to be visiting this page very often, so I need to make sure that I can get to it easily. So we hopefully have found our teacher web pages. If you have not yet, again, type in the chat and hopefully somebody from our team will be able to help you with that. So I actually started a brand new web page this morning because I wanted it to be fresh. I've got nothing on it. This is what it looks like when it came to me. So I'm going to start in my pages area, and that's going to be on the right-hand side. You'll see insert and then pages and themes. So we're going to start in pages today. When I get to pages, depending on how much I've used my website over the last few years, I might already have pages on there. A lot of teachers will have things like grading information or field trip information or contacts or whatever. So there might already be pages within here. To create a new page, I'm going to go down to the bottom of this menu, and there's a plus button there. And when I click that plus button, I'll see new page or new link. So let me talk about the difference between these two. If I want to add maybe a link to Clever, or I want to add a link to Google Classroom, I don't really need a page for that. I just need it when the parents click on that name for it to go to that place. So let me go ahead and just add a link to Google Classroom. So my link is classroom.google.com. and I'm going to call it Google Classroom. Notice that I have it open in a new tab, and I recommend that you keep that setting turned on. And then I'll click done. So now on my top navigation bar, I have a Google Classroom link. And if parents were to click on that, it will open up a new tab and it will take them to Google Classroom, which is great. Next at the bottom, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to look at adding a new page now. So if I add a new page, I'm going to click that and I'm going to give it a name. For our purposes, we're going to call it remote learning. And then I'll just click done. So now I have a remote learning page and a Google Classroom link. And I can continue to add pages because just depending on how you want your remote learning organized, you might want a page for each of your subjects. You might want a page for each of the days that you're expecting students to do things. You might want also maybe a page for read alouds. I've seen that on a couple websites. That's just going to house maybe all the read alouds that you'll be doing over the course of the next several weeks. So I get all my pages set, but right now I really want maybe to make this remote learning kind of a menu, because all of these items here are related to remote learning. And I want the parents to know that this is my hub for remote learning information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my read alouds link or my read alouds page, and I'm going to hover over where it says remote learning and I'm going to drop that page. And what you'll notice is it has now indented it, and next to remote learning it's put a little collapsible menu. And so now on my navigation I have my remote learning, and then I also have read alouds. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with Google Classroom, because again, and I'll reorder these. Again, Google Classroom is all a part of that remote learning area. I'm also going to put a remote learning expectations page. We'll just call it expectations, because I want parents to, again, communication is going to be so key during this time, that your expectations are clear, that you're communicating with parents on a regular basis, that they know what to expect from you and what if there are going to be due dates, or if there are going to be things that students are going to need to complete, spelling tests on Google Forms or anything like that. They need to know what those expectations will be. So going back to my remote learning page, as a reminder, this menu here, all of these are links, and this is also a link up here. So I have my remote learning. I'm also going to maybe add a schedule page. Right underneath my expectations. So I'm going to start on my schedule page just so that students and parents can see kind of how I'm going to organize that information. So if you have any questions about pages, go ahead and put those in the chat. But we're going to move on to that now, adding content to our web page. So I'm going to go back to my insert menu and talk about adding content. The first thing is I can always change, like aesthetically, I can change the header. And some of you might remember this. You can add images and so on. I can change, how this looks up here. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We're going to move down to actually adding content to this page. So a few things that have been updated since we initially introduced Google Sites, several years ago, is we now have on the right-hand side this layouts area. And this just makes it a little easier maybe for you to build your website if you are looking for some inspiration on how to build things, or if it's not letting you drag and drop things as you wish it would, then layouts is definitely going to be helpful for you. The next item that has been added recently is a collapsible text item. So if I choose this collapsible text, let's say, for instance, I'm going to organize my schedule by date. And then here are the items they need to complete. So what this does, and you can see it here now I have an April 6th header, and over here on the right-hand side, there is a little arrow that will allow parents and students to expand and collapse those expectations. Because if we're looking about, like, today is April 3rd, and we are going to make it till who knows what date in May, there's going to be a lot of dates, right? So this just kind of condenses all of that content so that it makes it easy for parents to navigate, especially if I'm looking at maybe having a list of items here, then this content is going to be really long and maybe overwhelming if parents get there. But if I insert a couple collapsible menus, now I make it much easier to navigate my schedule in terms of what the students need to turn in on that day. So you can see I've got multiple days there, and I can continue to add days as I begin to plan some of those things. Depending on how you want to organize your content, maybe before Monday you add April 6th, and then before Wednesday you add April 8th. So as opposed to the um, first date being at the top and then going chronologically down, maybe your first date is at the bottom and going chronologically up. Just depending on how often you're going to be organizing that content, you may want to rearrange some of those things. So I've got my collapsible menus here. And then just kind of scrolling down, most of these are still things that you're used to being able to add. Things like buttons are still in there. Dividers is just going to allow you to divide up that content. The divider looks very similar to this black line that's underneath the date, April 8th. That's what a divider would look like. As a reminder, I can add YouTube content on there. I can add docs, slides, sheets, forms. All of those are going to be great ways to deliver content to students. So we will talk about at the end how to share those things so that parents can actually see them, because what we don't want is a whole bunch of emails about request for access and so on. So I'm going to skip over to a different page here. Maybe I'm going to look at my read alouds. So on my read alouds page, I want to use one of my layouts. So I'll just click whatever layout I would like to use. And that what you'll notice here is that I have an option to add a picture there. I can add a heading, and then I can add a little welcome message. So my heading might be Alouds, and then here's my welcome message. And this picture, I'm sure I can find a picture of a book. I can do a quick little Google image search and insert. And now I've got a wonderful book right there. I'll make that a little bit bigger. So once I welcome my students and set the expectations for the read alouds, then underneath that, I'm able to actually then add those read alouds. So I'm going to choose from my Google Drive. So over here on the right-hand side, I can either click Google Drive, or if I double click in this white space, I can also add from Google Drive here. Now, again, we're doing a Screencastify webinar on Monday. So if you've got any questions about this, feel free to join us on Monday. But I'm going to go to my Screencastify folder. And I'm going to find my read aloud for that day, and I will click insert. So now my video is going to show up for parents here. And maybe I also double click, add some text, and I add what the name of the book is. Information about the book, and maybe some questions I might have for students, or if I want them to do a 5-finger retell, then I might add that information there. So I can add additional information right next to my video, and I might even add the date at the top, just so that the students have that. So let's go ahead and add April 6th. And then I'm going to highlight that text, because right now it's small. It's just regular text. So if I highlight it right above that, you'll see it says normal text. And so I'll click that, and I'm going to make it a heading. I can make it bold or italicized, and I can also center that text as well. So here's my read aloud for the students, and I do the exact same kind of structure for each read aloud day that I might have for my kids. So moving on to my next page here, I'm going to come in and set some expectations for the kids. And maybe some of those expectations include going to places like Clever to log into IXL, Reading Eggs, iReady, and Brain Pop. So I'm going to make a little message here. So I say, in order to log into these things, please use Clever. So I want there to be a link for Clever on that text right there. Make this a little bit bigger. I want there to be a link. So I'm going to highlight that text, and right above it, actually, there is a little link icon there. I choose Insert Link, and I'm going to grab the URL for Clever. Actually, I'll go to the TSC webpage and do that. So if I come here to the students page and I just right click here where it says Clever, and I'm going to say copy link address, and I'll paste it. So that is now going to link my students to Clever so that they are able to log into those resources that we will be using. And I can continue to set expectations however I'd like to. If you have any questions about how to edit text or do any of that formatting, go ahead and put those in the chat right now. I'm going to scoot back to my schedule for a second. And I want to show you something about the way this content is organized. So I've got my collapsible menus here, but maybe I want to show these a little more differentiated. And so I'm going to click on this area over on the left-hand side, and you'll notice I have a little paint palette. I have a duplicate section, and then I have a trash can. So if I click on that paint palette, that's actually going to allow me to add some emphasis to this section. And so my page might look a little striped, right? I would have April 6th in white, April 8th in blue, and then April 10th in white, and so on. So I can add a little more emphasis to those days so it's easy to find for the kids and for the parents. Okay, going back to our schedule here, I just want to make sure that I'm talking about everything. The last piece that I want to talk about before I wrap up and ask if you guys have any questions is sharing this. So initially, just sharing your web page. Let's talk about that and make sure that your web page is shared correctly. This web page right now is not currently published. So when I first published this page, because I know we have some new web page users, when I first published this page, I'm going to click at the top right, publish, and then again, publish. What you'll notice though is that, and maybe you didn't notice it because it was a little quick, is that it is published, but only for TSC. Now that my site has been published, right here at the top where it says share with others, so this little person plus, of course I should have gone there first. I am going to choose that, and then right here in the middle it says published, anyone at Tippecanoe School Corporation can find and view. But that does not include my parents. It does include my students, but that would only be if they're signed in with their TSC account. So I'll click change next to that. And I'm going to choose the top one here. Anyone can find and view the published version. That means that my parents are able to get to my site. And then I'll just click done. So again, to change your published settings or to make sure that you have the published settings in the right place, I'm going to click share with others and then change it to anybody can find and view your site. That will allow parents to get to your published page. I've had a couple teachers reach out to me asking about, well, I'm a music teacher and I might be using copyrighted content in some of my videos. Now I'm able to use the copyrighted content like the music in my videos, but I have to make sure that not anybody can watch my video. Only TSC people can watch my video. So I want you to make sure that you're being very clear with parents that their student needs to be signed in order to see that content. But what you are able to do is still share your website publicly, but then share the content only within TSC. So I'm going to add a document here to April 6th, for instance. So I'll come to my Google Drive. And I'm going to find a document. I believe I have quite a few things, but I'm going to come to my Connected Learning Team folder, find the content that I'd like to add. And maybe my content for this case is the Google Sites outline that I just shared with you guys. So I'll find my Google Sites outline and I'll click insert. It's going to embed that content there for parents. But right now, this document, while it looks nice to me, isn't actually shared outside of TSC. Now, as a warning, there's really no way for me to know that unless I go and I try to visit my website on my phone or something, or a parent alerts me, or I try and go to my personal site. So just make a note as you're sharing things on your website to always go back in and look at those sharing settings. So now I'm in this document that I just embedded on my webpage, and I'm going to click share at the top right hand corner. If I would like only students to be able to view that content, because again, it's under copyright or something along those lines, then anybody at TSC with the link can view is fine. If I want parents to be able to view it, I'm going to come here to the bottom and click advanced. And then at the top, I have change. And then finally, the second option here, anyone with the link can view, is going to be how you'll want to share all of your content for your web page. I'm going to show you a quick tip to save you some time. If I go to my Google Drive and let's say I have a folder that I am going to organize all of my remote learning content into, everything that I'm going to share on my website for this time is going to be in this remote learning folder. I can right click on the folder, I can click share, and I can actually set the exact same settings on that folder, which means that I don't have to go into each individual item and share it individually. It's now going to be shared with view only all the time, and I can just start embedding all of that stuff onto my web page. So I'm going to click publish now. And I'm going to view my web page. So I'm going to click the arrow and I'm going to go to view published site. And I can see here's my homepage, which I didn't add anything to. My remote learning, again, which I didn't add anything to. Let's go to my schedule. My schedule with those collapsible menus. And then my embedded Google Doc. I go up to my read alouds. I have my books with my read alouds welcome message and my Screencastify video with the April 6th schedule of what the students need to do. All right, I believe that is all the content that I need to share with Google Sites. I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll go ahead and answer any questions that come through on the chat.